At 94 years old, Clint Eastwood remains a living monument to American cinema, the kind of figure carved into pop culture so deeply, it feels like he was always there. But behind the gravel voice and cold squint lies a man whose life story is even more gripping than any Western showdown. And recently, something surprising slipped out. Clint Eastwood has a very personal, very specific list of people he never wants to see at his funeral. From legendary actors to modern directors, it's a list built on old grudges, ideological battles, and scars that never quite healed. But before we reveal those names and why Clint drew such harsh lines, you need to understand the journey that forged him. Because Eastwood didn't just play the rugged lone wolf on screen. In many ways, he lived it. The making of a rebel. Clint Eastwood Jr. was born in San Francisco back in 1930, right as the Great Depression swallowed the country whole. His family moved constantly, chasing work wherever his dad could find it, which meant Clint learned early on to rely on himself. He grew tall, lanky, with a skeptical grin that hinted he didn't quite trust the world because, honestly, why would he? By the time he finished high school in Oakland, he'd stacked up odd jobs like trophies, lumberjack, lifeguard, hay baler, even working at a gas station. He didn't have movie star dreams, he was just surviving. That is, until Uncle Sam came calling. Drafted during the Korean War, Eastwood found himself stationed at Fort Ord, where he first rubbed shoulders with actors and filmmakers on military training films. It was a tiny spark, but it would become a wildfire. From nobody to the gunslinger. When Eastwood stumbled into Hollywood, he didn't exactly blow the doors off. Throughout the early 50s, he played nameless soldiers, lab techs, second cowboy on the left. Producers thought he was too tall, too quiet, too something. But in 1959, everything flipped. CBS cast him as Rowdy Yates in Rawhide, a television western. The role was supposed to be minor, but audiences locked onto Eastwood's brooding stare and the way he seemed to carry secrets under his hat. Almost overnight, he went from an extra to a household name. Then came the big gamble, flying to Spain to shoot an Italian director's dirt-cheap cowboy movie. Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars was gritty, bloody, and morally murky, the anti-Disney Western. Critics sniffed. Audiences went nuts. Eastwood's nameless anti-hero, with the poncho and slow drawl, rewrote what a cowboy could be. Not pure, not noble, just dangerous, mysterious, and maybe doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. It rattled old-school purists, including one who would become Clint's lifelong opposite, John Wayne. John Wayne versus Clint Eastwood. On screen, John Wayne and Clint Eastwood might look like brothers in arms, but off-screen, they were oil and water. Wayne stood for the clean-cut hero, the cowboy who fought for family values and God's country. Eastwood, on the other hand, seemed to dig into the mud. His characters lied, stole, even killed in cold blood if they thought it justified. When Eastwood sent Wayne a script hoping to work together, Wayne fired back a letter calling it perverse, saying it tarnished the heroic image of the West. Eastwood never forgot that slap. In private, he respected Wayne's legacy, but he thought the man was stuck in fantasy, and Wayne thought Eastwood's view of the world was poison. If ghosts really do linger at funerals, Clint reportedly joked later in life, he'd hoped John Wayne's spirit stayed far away. Not out of hate, just because they were always destined to walk different trails. The Dirty Harry divide. The 1970s were messy times in America. Vietnam was unraveling. Cities were battling crime waves, and people were losing faith in every institution. That's when Clint Eastwood unleashed one of his most controversial creations, Inspector Harry Callahan. Dirty Harry didn't wait for warrants or play by the book. He shot first, didn't even bother asking questions later. Some hailed it as the movie that finally told the truth about how crime gets stopped. Others called it fascist propaganda. Eastwood didn't care. He liked poking at moral gray zones. To him, Dirty Harry wasn't endorsing vigilantism, he was exposing the broken system that made it tempting. That split view of America, between raw self-reliance and clean institutional optimism, would keep echoing through Eastwood's life. Especially when he later crossed paths with actors like Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks, men who seemed to stand for the very things Eastwood found naive. A director who broke his own rules. Even while he was cementing his image as cinema's ultimate tough guy, Eastwood was itching to get behind the camera. His first film as director, Play Misty for Me, proved he could handle more than squints and pistols. It was a psychological thriller about obsession. Then, in 1992, he flipped the entire Western genre on its head with Unforgiven. This wasn't some heroic cowboy story. It was a brutal, sorrowful look at violence and how it stains everyone it touches. The film won him Oscars for Best Director and Best Picture. It also proved something few critics had guessed. Beneath Clint's leathery skin was an artist obsessed with moral consequence. Later, films like $1 Million Baby and Gran Torino kept digging into aging, regret, redemption themes that felt almost confessional. And through it all, he shot fast. Clint was famous for wrapping films weeks ahead of schedule. Friends say it came partly from discipline and partly from watching his father drop dead of a heart attack at just 64. Eastwood decided then he wouldn't waste a single day. Family secrets and scars. Clint's personal life never fit the clean Hollywood fairy tale. His first marriage, to Maggie Johnson, lasted over 30 years on paper but was rocked by long separations and Clint's string of affairs. When they finally split, Maggie reportedly walked away with one of the biggest divorce settlements Hollywood had seen at the time. Meanwhile, Clint's family tree kept sprouting unexpected branches. By most counts, he has at least 8 children by multiple women. Some, like Scott Eastwood, embraced the family name and followed him into acting. Others kept their distance. Clint rarely comments on his kids publicly. He seems to carry the old cowboy rule: you don't parade your private life in town. Those who know him say he loves his family fiercely, but draws strict lines about loyalty and respect. And those lines help explain the shocking list of people he doesn't want anywhere near his funeral, who he banned from his goodbye. Over the past decade, small leaks from people close to Eastwood have revealed a hypothetical do not invite list for his funeral. It's less about petty grudges, more about principle. John Wayne, if he were alive, would top it. The two men embodied totally different visions of America. Eastwood apparently once said he'd rather not have Wayne's ghost looming over his last rites, judging him from beyond. Then there's Leonardo DiCaprio. Clint directed him in J. Edgar, but found his climb at crusading and Hollywood posturing a bit much. He respected DiCaprio's talent, just not what he saw as performative activism. Tom Hanks makes the list too. On the surface, they're both icons. But Eastwood, who sees the world as dark and complicated, reportedly finds Hanks's brand of cheery, dad-next-door optimism borderline dishonest. They clashed over style too. Clint runs one-take sets. Hanks likes multiple tries. Spike Lee is a more explosive entry. Back in 2008, Lee blasted Eastwood for not featuring black soldiers in his WWIU movies. Eastwood fired right back, accusing Lee of stirring divisions. Their public feud got ugly, and Eastwood never forgot it. Then there's Michael Moore, who once criticized American Sniper as glorifying war. Eastwood famously snapped that if Moore ever brought a camera near him, he'd kill him. Later, he called it a joke. Still, Moore would not be welcome at the last roundup. Finally, there's Sondra Locke, Clint's ex-partner and co-star through the 70s and 80s. Their breakup turned into a nasty court battle, with Locke accusing Eastwood of sabotage and emotional cruelty. Locke has since passed away, but insiders say Eastwood's wounds from that chapter still run deep enough he half-joked he wouldn't want her ghost hanging around either. Health, obsession, and the tragedy that drove him. Clint Eastwood has always seemed bulletproof. Even back in 1959, he was showing off push-ups and giving advice on vitamins in television interviews. He championed fresh fruits, raw vegetables, skipped sugary sodas, barely touched hard liquor decades before Hollywood discovered clean eating. But it was his father's sudden death that truly cemented this obsession. Clint was shattered. His dad hadn't even reached 65. After that, Eastwood doubled down on everything. His workout routines, tight film shoots, an almost manic drive to keep creating. Friends say he's been racing time ever since. Funny enough, while Clint mostly avoided drinking, he still opened a pub, the Hog's Breath Inn in Carmel. Maybe it was his way of staying social while sticking to his own code. Conclusion: the unfinished story. Today, at 94, Clint Eastwood is still reading scripts, still directing, still chasing stories. He remains unbent by Hollywood trends, political correctness, or even the steady march of age. In the end, the people he doesn't want at his funeral say more about his fierce sense of loyalty and authenticity than any scandal ever could. Because to Clint Eastwood, life was always a frontier. You made your choices, you stood by them, and you didn't sugarcoat the truth. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest Western Clint ever starred in wasn't on any screen. It was the one he lived. So if you ever wondered why Clint Eastwood keeps working, keeps fighting, keeps squinting into the horizon, even now, it's because his story's still rolling. And if he has his way, it'll keep surprising us right up to the final frame.